This exhalation of your last breath is one of your souls leaving your body at the point of your death. It is your free soul, the spirit that is self-aware, the part that carries your personality. Your life soul, the mindless force that once animated your body with its power, is left behind. Now your soul gathers up the spirit versions of the tools left for it in your grave, and it sets off toward the west. The west is the place where the sun plunges into the earth, the end of its passage across the heavens, the point of transition from day to night, and from life to death, from the land of the living to the realm of the dead, across the night sky. It is the Milky Way that leads to the land of the dead. To get there, your spirit must walk the path of souls until finally it passes through the sacred portal. But passing through is not easy. On its long and arduous journey, your soul now comes to a stream which cannot be forded or swum and can only be crossed by a log bridge. But the way is guarded by a ferocious dog that your soul must overcome before the journey to the land of the dead can be completed. This is a test. If you are not worthy, then you must remain here on the shores of the river for eternity, camped in limbo, neither alive nor dead, and no use to anyone. If you can find your way past the dog that guards the portal, then you may pass into the land of the dead. Here your soul can be drawn on by your descendants in the land of the living for consultation and to draw upon your power. When the time is right, your soul will return to the eternal source before being reborn as one of your descendants. And so the cycle of life and death continues for eternity, but only for those worthy of overcoming the spirit dog that guards the way. This is a generalized, truncated model of the death process, but the path of souls is virtually universal in the recorded beliefs of North American peoples and extends from Siberia to the Andes. There are differences in the details. The Miamis believed in a single dog, while the Shawnee believed that there were 4 dogs which attacked souls on the bridge. The Cherokee had to feed one dog at a fork in the path, and then following the path onward had to feed a second dog. If they did not have food enough for both dogs, they would be trapped between them for eternity. And so Cherokee burials had to provide ample food for the journey of the departed. The Guardian of the Afterlife theme is also found in the myths of Siberia among the Chukchi and Tungus, who believed in both the Guardian of the Afterlife dog and a spirit dog that would absorb the dead man's soul and act as a guide to the afterlife. The idea of a dog guarding the doorway to the afterlife perhaps sounds familiar, because of course the Indo-European form of this myth is well documented. In Greek, Indic, Iranian and Germanic myths, and less clearly in later Baltic, Lithuanian and Albanian superstitions, a multi-headed, sometimes multi-eyed, dog or dogs guards the entrance to the afterlife and challenge the dead before letting them enter. The name of the guardian dog in Greek, Cerberus, and Indic, Savara, was a cognate name, that is a word derived by regular sound changes from the same root. In this case, a late Proto-Indo-European root meaning spotted. Spots are a trait of domestic dogs, showing that the Proto-Indo-European afterlife guardian was specifically a dog and not a wolf. I always really liked that Cerberus actually means spot. In Mediterranean Europe, particularly in Greece and Italy, this chthonic death aspect of dogs is evidenced archaeologically by the sacrificed dogs found in the bottom of ritual wells, most of which were connected with the worship of Hecate, goddess of ghosts and death. So if you wanted to trace these kinds of beliefs into prehistory, you would expect to find dogs buried in human cemeteries or in places indicative of the afterlife, such as the bottom of shafts dug deep into the ground, and so into the underworld. We'll talk more about that later. So, we have similar myths in America and Europe. Surely though, this is only a coincidence. How can these mythological motifs be related when the two areas are separated by so great a distance? What could possibly tie these two peoples together? To answer this question, we have to go back in time, firstly to almost 4,000 years ago. In The Dogs of War, a Bronze Age initiation ritual in the Russian steppes, archaeologists David Anthony and Dorcas Brown describe a ritual at the Shrubnaya culture settlement of Krasnosamarskoye in the Russian steppes, dated to between 1900 to 1700 BC. The participants in this ritual consumed sacrificed dogs, primarily, and a few wolves, although more than 99% were dogs, violating their normal food practices during the winter. These winter-killed dogs were roasted, filleted, and eaten. Their heads were chopped into small, standardised segments with practiced blows of an axe on multiple occasions throughout the occupation. Through the violation of the dog-eating taboo, the participants entered a liminal state typical of a rite of passage. Parallels from comparative Indo-European mythology provide the indigenous narrative that gave meaning to this ritual. Anthony and Brown argue that it was an initiation into the widely attested Indo-European institution of the youthful male warband, the Kurios, symbolised by transformation into a dog or a wolf. In this Bronze Age coming-of-age ceremony, boys were transformed into warriors by symbolically becoming dogs and wolves through the consumption of their flesh. These boys came to this sacred ritual place with their own beloved dogs before killing them and eating them. If this sounds horrific, then that was the point. This was a complete inversion of the norms of this culture, and the power of inversion is common in ceremonies across the world. Anyway, there's so much to say about this that I'll have to make a separate video about the ceremony, and in the meantime be sure to watch my video on the Kurios for more about this sacred warband. The Kurios features in my novel Godborn, and the lead characters encounter another youthful warband of dog warriors. And when writing the story, I intended to include a scene of this dog-eating element of the ritual. But I already had scenes featuring the violent deaths of dogs in combat and a scene of a horse sacrifice, so I didn't want to potentially alienate readers anymore. The taboo still holds power today, even in fiction. So within comparative Indo-European mythology, it is accurate to say that dogs are connected with warbands and war, but they are connected to them because they are, more fundamentally speaking, potent symbols of death. This paper by Anthony and Brown is remarkable because they draw on comparative mythology to inform their analysis of the material evidence, and that's unusual for archaeology. But what does this have to do with the canine guardian of the afterlife? Well, it's in this paper where the link between these two afterlife guardian mythologies is made. The point here, though, is that this ritual had power because it was an inversion of the societal norms that held dogs in such enormously high regard. Now, from the 2nd millennium BC, we have to trace the evidence back further a few thousand years to 6000 BC. Adult dogs and wolves were included in mortuary rituals of North Eurasian foragers near Lake Baikal and further west in Siberia near the mouth of the Ishim. The dogs weren't just tossed into a pit. One was buried in a crouched or sitting position. Another had stone and bone implements placed around his head, and a pebble was placed carefully in his mouth. In an especially touching one, I think, a dog was interred wearing a necklace of 4 red deer canine teeth pendants. Some dogs were buried with people, while others were in their own graves. It appears then that dogs were considered by these foraging groups here in Siberia to be spiritually similar to humans, as were other animals among historic northern indigenous groups, other animals like bears. But only dogs were domesticated here, sharing the homes and food of the people. It seems that these dogs were considered to be part of the tribe, and that's why some dogs were given human-style mortuary rites. Dogs may not be guarding the entrance to the afterlife in this case, but it would seem they were travelling there with souls of their own, perhaps as companions, perhaps as guides, as in the beliefs of the Chukchi that we mentioned earlier. And now we have to go back in time again, this time much further, still in this region, but to 24,000 years ago. This was well into the last glacial period, when it was pretty cold. Ancient human DNA from Malta, an Upper Paleolithic cemetery near Lake Baikal from 22,000 BC, shows a cluster of genetic traits called Ancient North Eurasian by geneticists. This genetic cluster has been associated with the Malta Buret archaeological culture. So although it's not exactly synonymous, this is what we're talking about. Ice Age Siberians. They lived in semi-subterranean houses built with large animal bones for the walls, and reindeer antlers covered with animal skins for the roof. They made incredible artistic carvings of animals in ivory, bone and antler. And they were mammoth hunters, among other things. And we need to talk about these people now because the ancient North Eurasians are really the key to this mythological puzzle. Do puzzles have keys? Anyway, the ancient North Eurasians probably originated in Europe or Western Asia rather than East Asia. The common ancestor of ancient North Eurasians and Western hunter-gatherers separated from Eastern Eurasians around 40,000 BC, and ancient North Eurasians split from the Western hunter-gatherer lineage about 22,000 BC. The Upper Paleolithic ancient North Eurasian DNA makes up about 70% of the genetic ancestry of the later Mesolithic European Eastern hunter-gatherers. These hunter-gatherers were the ancestors of steppe peoples, of Baltic peoples, of Scandinavians, and ultimately, to one extent or another, of all Europeans. And ancient North Eurasian DNA makes up a portion of the genetic ancestry of Native Americans, up to 40% in some cases. In the Americas, the lowest amount of ancient North Eurasian ancestry is in Eskimos and Alaskan natives, as these groups are the result of migrations into the Americas about 5,000 years ago, while the first wave, Native Americans, like those in the Andes, show higher percentages. So we know that peoples descended from the ancient North Eurasians were the first to cross into North America. So the point of all this is that ancient North Eurasians are in part ancestors of Europeans and Native Americans. And so it would make sense that the afterlife guardian dog myth, common to both peoples, was derived from shared Upper Paleolithic North Eurasian sources. In which case, this might very well be the oldest myth recoverable through comparative mythology. On the other hand, maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe rather there's something about people's relationships with dogs that leads to the emergence of similar cultural expressions. Perhaps it's just the nature of dogs as watchful guardians of the tribe and the emotional attachment that people develop with them, as seen in the Siberian burial of a dog with a deer-tooth necklace. If dogs are guarding entrances in the material world, why wouldn't people everywhere imagine a spirit dog guarding entrances in the afterlife? I don't know. It's interesting to me though that the Native Americans have a concept of a multi-part soul. The Indo-Europeans also have a belief in the tripartite soul, so perhaps that is another clue about their ancient connections. It also seems significant that the domestication of dogs, although trying to pin down the exact moment of domestication is very difficult, seems to have occurred between 40,000 and 21,000 years ago in Siberia. If the ancient North Eurasians were the ones actually responsible for first domesticating dogs in the deep past, perhaps it's no wonder that they were incorporated into their mythology and why it was so enduring. So is this really evidence that the peoples of Ice Age Siberia, the Malta Buret culture, believed their souls had to get past a dog guarding the land of the dead? Personally, I'm pretty convinced. And it seems to me that there is more work to be done in exploring this idea further. What other common elements of these cultures can be discovered through comparative mythology and archaeology? So what do you think? Do you think the myth comes from the same Ice Age source, or is it just a coincidence? I wonder what other truly ancient myths are out there waiting to be discovered. If you liked the video, please help the channel grow by liking and sharing the video, and if you want to see more stuff like this, please do subscribe. Check out the links to my books in the description below. Thank you for watching.